Ciao tutti, welcome everybody to episode number 22 of Commentator's Corner. And I've got a very, very good friend of mine from one of the biggest motorsport nations, if not one of the most proudest motorsport nations in the globe. It is, of course, Italy. And my good friend, also a fellow commentator at AMX Global, Marco Barbanera joins me. Marco, good to see you. It's been a long time since we were talking to each other vis-a-vis, so to speak, but how are you keeping?
Doing fantastic. Thank you for having me here, Alex. And it's also, I think it's going to be a great opportunity because this is the first time I've been ever interviewed in my life. And, as commentators, we
Mm.
are always the ones doing the interviews, asking the questions to the drivers after the race. It's nice to be on the receiving end for once.
I think, well, that's one of the beauties of Commentators Corner because for future episodes, we're not just going to be talking to commentators, presenters, but also we're going to speak to people in other facets of not just sim racing, but in real life racing. We've got championship coordinators, social media experts, people who work in different aspects of sim racing, and there's so much more. There's quite a few guests already planned, so that also includes sim racing leagues. But Marco, just for the benefit of the audience at home, if you'd like to please introduce yourself and tell them a little bit about yourself before we get on to the questions.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. I'm Marco Barbanera, 34 years old. I you know, been in this sim racing commentary business for a bit now, almost 10 years, even though the first few years were completely on amateur level, self-produced for Italian leagues, until I got my quote-unquote big break in 2018. And from there on, has been basically non-stop. I took a little bit of a break at the beginning of 2022, to because maybe we'll go through it later. The 2020-2021 period was a bit busy,
Mm.
but you can't stay away for too long from this. And I kept doing stuff on the side, mostly the Italian side of things, until my good friend and our colleague Wei An Chan got me back into the English speaking side of things, back with AMX Global. And it's been nice keeping a balance between the Italian side, the English speaking side, and of course so the real life stuff. Work not in racing related, but
Mm.
still, because at some point you need to try to find which one is the right path for your life, and I'm still looking for it. But I like to keep my options open for the time being.
Always keep an open mind, Marco. That's the right way in putting it. So, the first question, Marco, is how did you get bitten by the bug of motorsports? And who, whether it be family, close friends, or an acquaintance, who was the main catalyst for that to happen?
Yeah, Italy is a very weird country sports-wise because yes, we have our excellences in some sports, Ferrari being one of it in motorsports, or of course in the 90s especially, uh, where I was growing up, we had so many top-level riders in the MotoGP, what was now called MotoGP, of course, and in World Superbike, we have some, so every once in a while in volleyball or in back in the 90s in basketball, one of my favorite sports, so we were good. But Italy is a nation that revolves around football.
Mm.
So usually when you grow up, unless you have some family member who was involved in some sort of way in another sport, you basically grow up with football, which happened in my family as well. But my grandfather and my father, um my grandfather from my mom's side and my father, they, for some reason, I noticed when I was growing up, they were always watching other sports apart from football. Like my family is one of the most passionate football families, like crazy for football here in this house, no? So, but they were watching basketball, football. Sorry, basketball. They were watching like volleyball. They were watching when it was time for the Olympics.
Mm.
Cycling, of course.
Yep.
How can I not talk about it? And one of my grandfather's favorite moments was on Sunday. One week was F1 and the other week was the bikes, watching. And basically, I can tell you that the first sporting event I can remember watching in its entirety was the 1995 Canadian Grand Prix. And I
Oh,
remember that my family was. I was sure I watched stuff before because I have some vague memories of watching stuff beforehand. The very first years of Max Biaggi coming up, I think was 94,
hmm
and I have some memories from some races, earlier F1 races. But I remember it was Canada, so it was late afternoon, early evening here in Italy, and my family were watching the football highlights because back then, of course,
yeah.
it was basically the beginning of satellite pay TV. So you have to wait like 7, 8 p.m. here in Italy to watch all the highlights from the football. And I was watching on the public television. They had the 1995 Canadian Grand Prix, of course, won by the only victory of Jean Alesi's career, and it never really stopped from there, to be honest, because I remember that my maternal grandfather used to come in the weekends to visit us, and so it was his tradition. My family went to watch the football game for Roma at the stadium when Roma
Mm.
were playing at home. So one Sunday home, one Sunday away, and we were alone after lunch. They left, and we put on the Grand Prix or the bikes, of course, in that case. And of course, it became tradition the Australian Grand Prix because back then it was like 3 in the morning for us in Italy, early wake up call for
hmm
Japan, etc. I can count on one hand the number of F1 Grand Prix I missed until 2016, 2017. Like literally would find any kind of excuse not to go places because I wanted to watch the race with my grandfather. So and then of course from there it evolved when the internet came along and sim racing came along in
hmm
the early notice for me, and discovering that there was a world outside of F1, and it never stopped from there, to be honest.
You know what? That is the longest, like, sort of explanation on how you got bitten, and it was really nice to hear. Of course, Serie A, the biggest league in Italian football, where you got Juventus, Roma, all the other teams. I still remember watching highlights of Serie A on Channel 4 over here in the 1990s, where you had all the main Italian players back from those times. You know, it was just like the crazy hairdos. Like the sort of like the mullet with the ponytail at the back of the head. If anyone might remember a particular Italian footballer, I do remember his first name being Roberto, and I can't remember his second name, but I think you might know the chap I'm talking about, who was part of the Italian World Cup squad. Gianluca Vialli was also part of the massive explosion of Serie A in the 1990s. Unfortunately, we lost him a couple of years ago. But he was a manager over here in the United Kingdom in the Premier League. Um, but how did you get involved in commentary? You said that sim racing came into your life in the early 2000s. Because Marco has worked alongside me. Chan Wei Han, you are on notice. You are on this show because you've already requested to be on here as well. We're going to get Brad, who's also part of the team. We might even get TJ and Reed to jump on the show as well, if I get the opportunity to worry about Korean to UK time zones at the moment. But that's for another time. How did you get involved in commentary? And who was the catalyst behind that? Was it something that you felt that you wanted to have an opportunity at doing, or did someone like say, "Look, give it a go, see how it pans out, go from there"?
There's another long explanation coming, because nothing is easy. But I remember in the late 90s, I like I think many people I know that
hmm
have been doing this. I would play with my PS1 back then and do commentary for my games when I was playing Pro Evolution Soccer.
hmm
And my mom was very worried about it. She kept saying to her friends, "My son keeps talking to himself." Or sometimes one of her friends would come over and she would say, "You hear him? He's talking to himself." And I say, I heard her, and I said, I'm not talking to myself. I'm doing commentary for the game. And my commentary, wasn't like, I heard some of my friends back then, they would say, oh, I do commentary as well. I said, how do you do commentary? And my friends would say, oh, I bash the referee and insult the opposition. My commentary was very balanced. If my team was playing badly, I would note it. If the opposition would score, I would be,
Yeah.
balanced. I wouldn't like say, So this went on for a bit. And then sadly, as I kept growing up, like I was like, 12, 13, 14, I realized that if I couldn't keep doing commentary if I wanted to beat the CPU at the game, because the reflexes, I've recently started playing some like old Nintendo 64 games I used to haste when I was like a kid, and I am terrible, no? So that went by the wayside for a bit. Then in 2009, I got contacted by a group of friends who had a podcast about baseball, an Italian podcast about baseball, which is my other great passion together with motorsport. And they said, Marco, you are the only, or one of the few fans of the New York Mets that we have in Italy. We want to interview for the podcast. Just talk about the new season. It was early 2009. So I do this interview, very nice, relaxed, more than interview. It was chatting with those. There were people I know in real life as well.
Yeah.
And when the podcast got up, the comments were, "Oh, Marco has got a very nice voice, and he's got like a very clear explanation of what he thinks, and we want to have him more. Can you get him, again?" And I said, I kind of like this, talking to the web radio, of course, no. So I asked the guys that were hosting this podcast to if there was the opportunity to have my podcast, not about baseball, about professional wrestling. And so it started. So I did from 2009 to 2011 professional wrestling podcasting, and then I did some baseball podcasting with them. And then in 2015 I went back into sim racing after a bit of break, and in 2015 with my very early iRacing group of friends, which still talk. I was talking to them before coming here. They said, let's organize an Italian iRacing championship with the Cadillac car.
Okay.
I said, okay, guys, but I'm so slow. I'm going to do the commentary. And so I did commentary and cameras with like no software, the beautiful fancy graphics we have now. It was all done like with trying to hide the iRacing interface, pressing plus minus on the keyboard, changing the cameras with the keyboard. It was they are still available on YouTube, by the way. I really liked it, but it wasn't really. I didn't do it for like the audience, but I wanted more. But back then in Italy there was no way to start something. There was no live stream of races. There was no software for that. So I really liked it, but the thing went a bit on the wayside until in 2017, late 2017, one of the big guns of iRacing broadcasting put an advert. They wanted a commentator for the newly released iRacing had just released the Dirt Oval side of things. They wanted to do like live commentary of like the Friday night big race, the SOF race. I sent an email to them answering this job advert basically. But I specify to them, guys, I am not a native speaker. I've never done anything like this in English. I don't know if the Dirt Oval side of things is the best way to do it. But still, this is me. If you want to, I never got an answer to that. So I said, okay, man, no way. Months go by. It's late March of 2018. And a friend of mine, Michele Costantini, was going to be racing in the iRacing World Championship with the Dallara car coming very, very soon. By the time this goes on, I think the first race will be already he's going to be on the 14th of September. He says, Marco, Apex Racing TV have posted that they are looking for commentators. I said, no, man, it was like Saturday night. It was 3 a.m. I came back from the pub, no, but you have to. They say, okay, maybe I've had a couple of beers too much, no? So because I wrote them an email,
Mm.
and I got an answer immediately after. Said, do you want to do a tryout tomorrow? I said, okay. I did a tryout with V8s at Bathurst, and they liked it apparently, because then since that day, early April of 2018 until the end of December 2021, I've been with them and doing basically one broadcast. Maybe no, one is 3-4 broadcasts per week was with them, and I am still to this day incredibly thankful, because it gave me so much pleasure, and especially during 2020, with all the real life drivers and people coming into sim racing, I was able to share the virtual commentary booth with people that if you told me the year before you are going to be on commentary with Paul Page, or you're going to be in commentary with Jordan Taylor, I said, this is not going to be possible. Are you kidding me? But it did happen. It did
Mhm.
happen, and it was again, to this day I'm still in disbelief how quickly it happened, how welcomed they make me feel, and all the fantastic people that I've met through the years at Apex Racing TV. It's I still get emotional, because it was I just came through a bad work experience in real life here in Italy,
Mhm.
and to feel so welcomed by them. I was, to be honest with you, Alex, I was a bit worried, because again, I'm not a native speaker. I've never spoken in English to a sizable audience of people, and it's another language, so you have to be quick when you cannot, like, you're commentating on races, so when things happen quickly, you don't have time to think about it. So I say, am I going? Plus, I mostly grew up talking to and listening to people from North America, and I was so worried, because I wasn't really good at understanding people from Great Britain and Ireland. So
Mm.
I had that problem as well, but now is basically the opposite after all these years. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's how it began, and how it's still going.
I mean that I had the opportunity of working with Apex Racing TV for the Rotax Sim Racing Challenge, because at that point in mid 2020, everything was locked down. We were all confined to quarters. Sounds like a bit draconian, but it was like we felt like we were all like trapped animals in little cages with bars, and we were just like trying to get out as quickly as we could. But yeah, shout out to Apex Racing TV. Um, Another one relating to commentary. What would you say, Marco, in no particular order, your top three biggest highlights of your commentary career so far?
Okay, in no particular order, I would say, and I've already spoiled this, but this this Skip Barber race that we did before lockdown, by the way, it was like 2019 still, and it was like this event. I said it's a one-off. It's a you know they gave me the briefing on Apex Racing TV. I said, okay. And then they added that there will be a guest commentator for the race. I don't know if you know him. It's Jordan Taylor. I said, the Jordan Taylor? I said, yes. So that was incredible. During lockdown, sharing the commentary box with Paul Page, and also during lockdown, sharing the commentary box with my favorite commentator of all time, which is Calvin Fish. So it's that was like who I was talking to. Racing wise, as a bonus one, I remember being in the commentary box. We were doing the like Apex Racing TV centered broadcast of the racing Grand Prix World Championship way back when this was still allowed, and back when they had the McLaren MP430.
Yep.
And it was a race at Zandvoort where it seemed like for the first time ever, Apex were going to win their very first World Championship race, until a botched pit stop
Oh,
uh, was basically caused the demise of, I think it was Peter Berryman that was going to win the race. And
yep.
I remember the excitement growing up in the commentary booth. I was, of course, in the commentary booth with behind the scenes. There were Alex, of course, who's the owner of Apex, and then now everyone was so dejected. But the emotions that were felt during that race were quite extraordinary, even if fortunately it didn't end up very well.
Yeah, I think Peter Berryman's still with the team. You've got the likes of Johan Harth, Kevin Ellis Jr., who are stalwarts of the Apex Racing team. But yeah, no, that's really cool that you got to have the opportunity of sharing a commentary box, a virtual commentary box, with the one, the only, the legend that is Mr. Jordan Taylor. That's pretty cool. Now, for those people, well, there's one item that we haven't touched on here, Marco. Is there? Because for those that don't know, Marco is a complete and utter petrol head like myself. And you also don't just do sim racing commentary, but you also do a little bit of marshalling as well, don't you? Tell people about that.
I was basically dragged into the marshalling side of things in 2019 by a very close friend of mine who I also met in real life first. And the first thing we talked about when we met each other at Vallelunga as fans was, do you do sim racing? Yes. Do you race on iRacing? Yes. So that's how we bonded. And he became a marshal the year after in 2016, and he kept bugging me, come, it's fun, you get to live up close. And in
Mm,
2019 I relented, and sadly, the first part of my marshalling career was short-lived because COVID struck
mm,
basically not even after a year I got my license. But still in 2019 I was able to do some uh, cool events, Italian GT, and of course that year in Vallelunga there was the Motorsport Games. So
yes.
I had the pleasure to working in pit lane, speaking with and dealing with drivers from all over the world. It was a beautiful event. And after a couple of years of break, I restarted again this year with a couple of hill climbs. Something different, no? Getting first time being out of racetrack. It's very tough, but if you love racing,
Mhm,
if you love motorsports, it's an unforgettable experience because you get to live the event up close from inside, and it's really in my opinion, a privileged perspective on the world of motorsport. So uh, certainly it has its cons, because it's long hours
yep.
here in Italy, especially here in Vallelunga in the summer. It's 50 degrees. In the winter, Vallelunga is in like the worst possible place of all central Italy. It's in a valley, very windy valley. So like from October until March, it's like 10, 20 degrees colder than the rest of the central part of where Rome is. So but it's especially Vallelunga being like more of a test track recently than a proper. Now, we have 6-7 racing weekends per year, but the Porsche LMP1 has been developed here. You get like BMW doing testing there. Uh, in we were supposed to have some tire testing for Pirelli a couple of years ago, I think, with Alpha Tauri. That
Mhm,
for bad weather didn't go through. So you can have some sort of even sneak peeks of what. The Glickenhaus, of course, has been developed there, the hypercar. So
mhm.
you get and recently in the last few years, with the fact that Stefan Rattel has moved and now he lives in Rome. For example, this year he's going to take over the 6 hours of Rome, which has been sadly declining recently. And he took over with SRO, and is going to be now a GT4 enduro race. I think they're going to race in the night with the part of the track with temporary lightning, which is quite cool.
Yeah,
So.
the
Uh,
Cesare di Roma, if I remember correctly,
mhm.
which is announced at the CrowdStrike 24 Hours of Spa-Francorchamps, which I so happened to be there, but not as a member of the media, but also I was working with Oru Simulators and SimuCube, who were partnered with one of the one of the biggest global endurance teams that has won over 55 championships, won 3 of the titles in SRO GT World Challenge last year, and also has Il Dottore amongst their ranks. I am, of course, talking about 9-time motorcycle world champion Valentino Rossi, who at the CrowdStrike 24 Hours was partnered with Maxime Martin and Augusto Farfus. And Vale did pick up his first official GT3 overall victory this year. And I think it was an Italian soil as well, which is, I think it was at Mugello, possibly?
Was a Misano
Misano,
Adriatico.
at the circuit that bears the late Marco Simoncelli's name as well, the Misano World Circuit Marco Simoncelli, since Marco's passing after that tragic incident in Malaysia a few years ago. And that's not to say that is a downer on that part. It was at the right place, right time, with the right crew. Now, what was the first ever motorsport event that you attended in person, Marco? So do you remember when, where, what racing did you see? Who did you go with?
I remember very well the day, and it kind of ties with what you just said, because we had a friend of ours when I was growing up, a friend of my father, who was racing in the Ferrari Challenge in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember he invited us to Vallelunga to watch a race. I still have like a picture that I took inside his car. I was, 5 years old back then, and I remember, the noise, the sound of the cars. That day was the last day of April of 1994. Which I sadly don't remember if it's 30th or 31st. I think 30th. I think April is 30 days. I'm very bad with maths.
Don't worry about
So
it. Most commentators are anyway. So
I,
myself,
I
especially,
remember.
myself especially, when I was at the Rotax Max Euro Trophy in the mid part when we had thunder, lightning on the finals day, and we had torrential downpour, and I was working out on an Excel spreadsheet as the final races of the season were going on who was going to pick up the titles. So maths, folks, are not commentators' strong points unless you are working as a double act. If you're working solo, that's even worse when you're trying to multitask. And multitasking and blokes don't really go together at the best of points. But like you were saying, so it was Ferrari Challenge 1995, 1994. And the sound of all those cavallino rampantes going around the track. I mean, it's like a cacophony of wonderful engine noises.
I remember when we came back home that Saturday. We arrive in the house, and my father turns on the TV, and I still can remember clearly. I haven't lived in that house for 24 years now.
Mm.
So you had this big TV in the distance, and I remember this black silhouette of this car coming through and planting itself into the wall. And of course, was Roland Ratzenberger's crash. And
Yeah.
my father was like in disbelief. And I got that something bad happened. But what really gets me when I think about it is that I don't remember anything about the Grand Prix the next day. But my family always tell me, and I kind of have a vague, recollection of this, that for the next 2-3 months, I kept asking my family, what happened to Senna? Why is Senna not racing anymore? So even though I don't remember, evidently the talk about it was so big, also because it happened in Italy, of course, no?
Yes.
And so again, it's going back to what I was saying earlier. When you get into the sport also on the marshalling side, or even on the commentary side, of course, it's real life, you also appreciate, because we've seen in recent years, especially in top level motorsport, aka Formula One, where the drama is let's say that the drama supersedes the fact that these are in fact still human beings, still playing a very dangerous game. So when you start hearing the fanboys of one driver or another driver moaning with each other and saying silly things, or God forbid wishing bad things to happen to the other drivers, you kind of want to take a step back and say, this, no matter the technological advancements that they are going to make, this is still going to be a dangerous sport. I had a guy in the hill climb I did in June as a marshal hit a bump in the road at the exactly wrong time. His Porsche, beautiful 70s Porsche, spun and hit an haystack at precisely the right angle, that the haystack went like flying. So the car hit a brick wall, bang in the middle, thankfully on the passenger side. And this car broke up in half in front of me with flames because the engine went one side and whatever was remaining of the cockpit went on the other side. These moments are like, the driver was thankfully unarmed. We were joking, just probably was as scared as probably I was after it. But I think that with the amount of drama, and sadly, I think also manufactured drama that you get sometimes in top level motorsport, you tend to forget about this, which sadly is something that will never ever go away. Of course, more so in bike racing. I mean, we see what happened to Francesco Bagnaia a couple of weeks back, where he was
Yes.
incredibly lucky to get away with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's part of motorsport, and despite everything, you can stay away from it. In good, like, you always think about it, like, is this really worth it? Sometimes, and it's difficult to have an answer. But when you hear the engine noise, when you see the beautiful battling or driving to the limit, it's difficult to have an answer.
Yeah. Well, we're now going to get on to a funny part of the show here, and it's to do with social media. Now, Marco, I've headed onto your Twitter account where there is a lot of
Mm.
references about football. And I'm gonna,
Oh, oh
no,
dear.
no, 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 no. But I want to know the explanation about the gift that I'm just about to explain.
Mhm.
So, right, tell me, which football club do you currently support at the moment?
Chelsea Football Club.
Right, on November the 12th, 2022, Chelsea, and I'm going to put this on the screen now, along with the GIF that Marco has put on Twitter. So Chelsea FC go win together, draw together, lose together, together Chelsea. And then the GIF that Marco has posted and quoted the tweet says Giornata de merda, which is basically what a shit day. Explain, please. Explain for the folks at home and for me, because I looked at it and I just went, I was like thinking, hang on, I can actually hear Marco's voice actually saying that in Italian.
Oh yeah, I think that was the beginning of. I think also I remember where the GIF is from one of my favorite Italian TV shows. I think that given that last year was just around the corner the World Cup, so that
Mhm.
was like the final or next to final match day before the break. And Chelsea were already in their downhill bit of the season, which they never really recovered from. So, when I think that was one of those tweets that, sporting organizations or team do when things don't go well. And
Yeah.
you, as a fan, you are not buying it. So, yeah.
That's a perfectly good explanation when they say, well, we win together, we lose together, and passionate fans of football like yourself will think, what a crock of shit have you just posted on Twitter, and put a GIF in your native language as well. Giornata di merda. I think. I hope I got the pronunciation correct there as
Yes,
well.
yes, yes, yes,
Thank you,
yes.
thank you. But that's the funny bit of social media. I'm sure there's other ones, but that was the one that straight away stood out to me, without a shadow of a doubt. Um, Now, of course, everyone has their preferred choices when it comes to favorite racing drivers. Are there any, whether they be from Italy or from further afield, who would you say are probably a couple of the racing drivers that you really support and admire and have been a big fan of for quite a long time?
I only like actively rooted and supported, like as a proper fan, two drivers.
Hmm.
One driver and one rider in my lifetime. I think it's because I became a fan of them organically, and when they left the sport, well, one of them has left. The other is doing a bit of other things, but not like top level anymore.
Mm.
I couldn't get into each one of them, and a new one, no. So on the bike side was Max Biaggi, and on the racing side was Juan Montoya. So,
Mm.
and you can already tell that growing up in the late 90s, early 90s especially, in Italy as a fan of Juan Montoya and Max Biaggi was not easy for a guy, going to school, where of course everybody was a Ferrari fan in their dominant years, and everyone was a Valentino Rossi fan in his dominant years. And
Yes.
especially Max Biaggi was the usual suspect when it came to the humiliating defeat. Whilst Ferrari were so good that every once in a while Montoya won a race, but nobody was really expecting him to win. But still, if you had to make fun of someone, you would make fun of the not the for example, Raikkonen, who was quiet and calm. You would make fun of the brash, extravagant Montoya, who was also more often than not being boasting about how good he was, or
Yeah.
how he was going to do this and do that, and then come Sunday Ferrari would win with 2 laps on everybody else. So but I really love both of them, and I still of course follow Juan Pablo and doing IMSA right now, but yeah, after them it has been just being a fan of the sports and not a fan of a driver.
You know what? That's so. I mean, because the thing was, when everyone was spotting Valley, Max Biaggi was like, it's like it was like Batman versus Joker, and effectively Biaggi was considered as Joker, and Valley was like nothing. The Peter Pan of motorcycle racing could do nothing wrong. Even at his age, and he's 3 years younger than me, he still looks like he did when he was in his early 30s, which I find is absolutely ridiculous. I but I will be completely honest with you. For those people that don't know, that when I was at the CrowdStrike 24 Hours at Spa-Francorchamps, I had the opportunity of a garage tour with WRT. And who just happened to walk to my immediate right hand side? I'm going to put a picture of it up right now. Valet walked past, having had a discussion with Maxime Martin, and then I've got the likes of Alessandro Bico, Williams esports driver, Moreno Sirica, and they're all grabbing pictures with Valentino. It was one of the most heartwarming moments I've actually had, where I thought, hang on a second, I can make my dad really, really jealous, but then I can also admire the fact of how popular Valentino is in Italy. Like, no matter where he goes now, Brands Hatch, the pit was rammed when he did the GT World Challenge Sprint Cup with Maxime Martin earlier on this year. One of my friends went, it was so difficult to try and get an autograph off of Valentino because everyone made a beeline for the number 46 at Team WRT, and Valentino Rossi is the only person I think I know of in modern day racing that has had his actual number, the one that was on the front fairing of his MotoGP bike when he was racing with Yamaha, when he was racing with Ducati, on the side of the car. No one else on the GT World Challenge grid has got that luxury, but it's because of the power of how Valentino has just sort of really captured the masses, so to speak, in terms of outreach and just how likable the guy is. Because he's always smiling. He's like, ciao tutti. The bloke's never. I've never seen the bloke with an upside down smile. Never in my life. Which is quite a weird thing to say, but it is actually true. Next question, Marco. Have you ever met a racing driver or a personality, be it either, whether you've been marshalling? I know we've talked about Jordan Taylor a bit earlier on, so I think that probably might have preempted the answer to this question. But have you ever been speechless or starstruck when you've met a racing driver, or you've met a personality in motorsport, whether it be high level, or whether it be on, like say Italian GT or something like that, or at the FIA Motorsport Games when they went to Vallelunga for the first running of it?
Well, I remember that I was couple of months before the Motorsport Games, we have Italian Endurance GT, and there were a couple of special guests for that event. 3 of them, in fact, because there was a Italian privateer Ferrari team who had as their, because it was three drivers per car, no, in that event. This Ferrari team had Giancarlo Fisichella and Jacques Villeneuve, and that was my first ever event where I was assigned to the pit lane. I usually, started on the track, but basically I then moved to the pit lane after that every time. No? So I didn't have the chance to talk to them, but to see Jacques Villeneuve walk, and of course, being a marshal, you have these perks. There were the crowd that wanted to get into the box, but they couldn't. No, but I was a marshal, so I could. To see him with his, his legendary helmet that has never changed over the years has been quite incredible. And in that same event, that was the Friday. Saturday, Sunday, I was assigned to the other side of the pit lane where the BMW Team Italia was positioned. And their GT3 car, they had 2 Italian drivers, and they had Alexander Sims, who really, made a great impression on me because he was, it was Italian GT, not the most important competition. But since the Saturday morning when I was moved to their pit, to their box, focused, concentrated, and they won the race, of course, mostly because he was absolutely fantastic during the whole weekend, and really composed. Like he was taking it super seriously, and honestly, it was Italian GT. Not to belittle Italian GT, but for a driver of his caliber, that was like sort of like training more than that. And in Spa 2016, but this will be like something for the future. In Spa 2016, I played slot cars with Kimi Antonelli. So maybe one day, next year
Yes.
he's doing F2, no? So he's already having a great young career. But if he achieves something even bigger, I will be able to say I played slot cars in the Pirelli tent in the pit lane Spa Francorchamps with Kimi Antonelli. So and also I ran into Duncan Cameron, who's not super famous, but
Yeah.
maybe in more in the but he races a lot in Italy, of course. When they were doing some and that was the first time I worked next to like a driver properly. If I think about it, these are like the that's when I realized I was working the paddock in Vallelunga, and then he's not super famous maybe in the world of motorsports, but in Italy, again, during the marshalling, I went through, they were doing some TCR testing in Vallelunga, and in one of in the Honda pit stall, there was engineer Bruno, which is the leader for not only that, but the technical leader at Honda, but mostly he's famous for being the technical voice of Italian public television for Formula One. And so, to be next to him, of course, always keeping my distance because these people are working. But it's unbelievable sometimes, being so close to people you have seen only on TV or in races.
I was going to say, because when you mentioned the Italian GT Endurance, now for those that don't know, there was a crack squad that was actually run by, if I remember correctly, Roll Motorsport at a certain 24-hour race. Now, for those that don't know, Roll Motorsport is also partially run by a certain Italian racing legend, Roberto Ravaglia, touring car wizard. Touring car wizard ran Tom Coronel in the FIA World Touring Car Championship. If anyone might remember, when Bruno Spengler, Timo Glock, and the legend that... No, not the legend. I don't use that word for this man. He is an enigma. He is a true personification of grit, determination, always with a smile on his face. I met this man and interviewed him at Hockenheim 2015 during DTM Free practice one, it is none other than Alex Zanardi. And people might remember they were gunning for a top 10 finish. I think it might have been the 24 Hours of Spa. They were running in the Z4 BMW GT3. Timo Glock was bringing the car home. An hour before the checkered, engine went bang. And I think they were being run by Roberto's team at that time. So Alex might have been in the Roll Motorsport team because I think they still operate, if I remember correctly.
The BMW Italia motorsport team was
Yes.
run by Ravaglia.
Yeah.
So yeah, I actually had to talk to him as well. I knew he was an important personality because basically our duty was to keep track by hand of who went in the car when, because of the driver change rules. No, and I remember my colleagues up and down pit lane were a bit worried because the team managers didn't want to disclose the order, and the only way you knew it was if you looked at the helmet. And each driver had on their helmet a very small sticker with number 1, 2, or 3, which was driver 1, 2, 3. But that was not necessarily the order they came into the car. No, so
Yeah.
on Sunday morning, I go to Mr. Ravaglia and say, can you just tell me who's 1, who's 2, and who's 3? And he said, no. I'll tell you exactly who gets in the car when. So the first driver will be this guy, then this guy, then this guy. I said, thank you very much.
And that's the thing in motorsport. If you don't ask, you don't get. You know, Roberto could have very well have said to you then, Marco, you're going to have to wait and see. I'll tell you. But the thing was, he was gracious enough to do that. When you have people like Roberto, Alex, when I interviewed him, I still remember doing the interview, and I mentioned about his days in Formula 3000 when he was running with a team that still is active, folks. Il Barone Rampante. Still running to this day in modern day motorsport. And I still remember the words that Alex said to me, and I will never forget them. He said, well, of course, thank you very much for the lovely introduction. And that phrase, we had a wonderful, we were running slightly over time. I needed to go back. And I was like, people like thinking, who have you just interviewed? And I was silent. They went, you've interviewed Zanardi, haven't you? I went, yep. They could see by the glint, by the gleam in my eyes that my eyes were completely glazed over. And he's one of the most, one of the biggest, loveliest people. You know, and they always say, watch out for the nice ones because they can be absolute demons behind the wheel. And even after his double amputation, after the massive accident at Lausitzring back in the early 2000s at IndyCar, he became the first double amputee to win a World Touring Car race. And he's become a gold medalist, funny enough, at Brands Hatch for the Olympic Games. So it was at a racetrack he gets his gold medal. I was like, and then he does a guest round at DTM, and I remember it was, where was it? I think it might have been when DTM went to Misano. I think it might have been Misano. I can't remember off the top of my head. You know what? Just for the hell of it, because I remember reporting on the race from home. It was Misano 2018, the last year that DTM had Mercedes-Benz before they decided to up sticks and go away just before Class 1. But I mean, that's really cool. Like when you were there at Vallelunga for the Italian GT Open Endurance side of things, and meeting the likes of Alexander Sims and having a nice little chat with Roberto Ravaglia. That's really, really cool. Do you have any inspirations when it comes to commentary, be it in either the English language or Italian, like you were saying about Bruno, who does the technical wizard that's on the F1 broadcasts in Italy? Are there anyone that you sort of inspires you to sort of continue pushing forward as a commentator?
Yeah, I have a sort of maybe anachronistic view about commentary, especially with the way commentary has gone, especially here in Italy. I think that commentator, and again, if evidently the new style, as I call it, works, but I don't like when a commentator makes himself the protagonist, the main character of the show. I think the commentator has to be there and be some sort of a companion to the viewer that's watching, and not be, again, the star of the show himself. So I've always liked commentators who have had a calm demeanor, kept their voice, uh, calm and not being. I mentioned Calvin Fish way back when. I remember because in 2014 I finally found out. No, in 2017 I found out that IMSA were putting all of the races on on YouTube. So I started binge watching every IMSA race from the very first 24-hour of Daytona of 2014 and onwards. And I was very sad when they switched from the. Calvin Fish is not there anymore, but they switched at some point from the TV coverage with the commercial, so there was less stuff, to like the Radio Le Mans commentary, which is very good. But I still miss Calvin Fish, and of course, I really loved Bob Varsha as well, especially because I also, going back to Zanardi. They started showing kart here in Italy or in Europe on Eurosport in the late 90s, early 90s, but it was always either early Sunday evening or in the night of Saturday or Sunday. I couldn't stay up that time, no? So I would catch a race every once in a while, but I couldn't watch all the races. I would read the reports the next morning on, very first years of the internet for me. So when I got Zanardi's first book, and I read through his kart years especially, and then I went back a few years ago, and now all these races are available on the internet. You watched the 1996, 97, 98 kart seasons with Paul Page, and when Paul Page wasn't available, there was Bob Varsha, of course, on commentary. So it was amazing. And another thing that I like to do, more on the Italian side of things, the very last old school commentator that we had in Italy for football, he was the voice of the national team on public TV for so many years. One legendary Bruno Pizzul, who basically. I say that a commentator needs to be well prepared for what he's going to do, but he doesn't need, in my opinion, to have a billion sheets of paper in front of him, or even worse, prepare things he wants to say beforehand. I mean, I can get behind an introduction, but sometimes you hear this commentary reaction to something that happens, and it sounds fake or pre-prepared.
Yeah.
But he was the voice of the national team for so many years, and when Italy national team in football plays, there is like 60 million people watching. Okay, so you have to be on point. Okay, and people that have met him, I know I've had the chance to talk to a few football real life commentators over the years. And I always told them, Bruno Pizzul, I really liked him. And they said, how we prepared for a football game? He said he prepared with a glass of wine and a cigar. And that's the only thing he got in the commentary box way back when, smoking was still allowed in football stadiums. And so I want to get in the commentary box prepared always, but I also want to not rely on taking notes or maybe having notes in front of me, but I want to try to use my memory. And also, I think that makes for a more free flowing kind of commentary that, if there is some sort of dead moment, which can happen in motorsports, there are huge chunks of the racing which are objectively not that exciting, then, that can help moving, the broadcast along, just of course the off topic needs to be self-contained and not extremely long, because then
Yeah.
again we fall into the trap of the commentator being the protagonist, which it shouldn't be. But
Yes.
I think it helps, in my opinion. And all these years now, fingers crossed, I don't remember making any like massive blunder, even if I'm not taking notes. One thing I'm really go like very 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 hard upon myself. I want to know the pronunciation of the names, all of them, because I've heard for so many years commentators butcher names from other countries.
Oh.
So I always try to go to, of course, sometimes in a racing, in sim racing, you don't have this privilege, no? You show up for a commentary and you don't know who's going to be there. But maybe you see this driver coming like the next race and the next race. Then what I always try to do is, if I don't know the pronunciation, I send him a message and say, how do I pronounce your name? Or is the way I'm pronouncing your name correct? I'm a big, this is one of my big pet peeves, trying to get the drivers' names correctly.
I completely 100% agree with you on that matter of fact. The reason being, because through my karting travels, I've been to, of course, recently the final round of the Euro Trophy. It wasn't too bad because there were that names that I'd already known. You know, the French, the German ones are quite straightforward. The Spanish, the Italian, like we have Matteo Pianezzola, who is actually tied in with Iron Lynx, who run the Iron Dames, so like Sarah Bovi, Michel Gatting, and Rahul Fry. And are going to be running the new Lamborghini Squadra Corse SC63 LMDH next year, which will have the likes of Romain Grosjean and Daniel Kvyat. It's really funny when people try way too hard and then they take every single syllable or every single letter to heart. Now, this is a bit of a pet peeve of my own because I speak 3 different languages, but it's a pride of place. Like, for instance, we had a we had a Polish driver running in Project T20, which is the full electric carts from Rotax. So when you see the word Tomas and it's spelt in Polish Tomas, the Z becomes an H, so it's Tomasz. And it's like, say, I've got a gig over in Latvia and Lithuania. There are some names that are hard for me to pronounce, but the good thing is I asked the organisers. Because sometimes you don't, as a commentator, even in karting, have the opportunity to go around to every single person. Another perfect example of someone butchering a name, a surname. Some good friends of mine who do have Italian heritage, and their surname is Spiezia, so which is spelled Spiezia, Spiezia. So when I first got to know them, they're originally from New Jersey in the United States, just over the water from New York. So Michelle is his mum, Francesco, or Frankie as we call him, his dad, and then you got Ellis. So I introduced myself to them and I said, look, I've heard a bit of a story about how you guys have upped sticks from Hoboken. And I said, how has it been said previously? And how do you actually say the true Italian pronunciation? Because I want to do right by it. And every single like once you've heard it once or twice, it goes into your head, doesn't it, Marco? Well, he went back to the German Electric Kart Championship, and the German commentator, bless him, he tried, but got it every single time. Tried it 3 or 4 times, got it completely wrong, butchered it, and then just said Ellis the American in German, which was a bit. Most people would say that is a complete and utter cop out. Yeah, you're probably right, but it's. I've had to. There's a family, a Georgian family whose 2 sons I'll be commentating on this coming week in Jelgava, and it's a Georgian surname, so it's Kobahidze. You don't say the K that's in front of the H. So he said it's Kobahidze, and I said thank you so much for telling me. I was wondering if I could feel my ears burning a little bit, and I always say on the commentary, if I'm getting the surname wrong, please come over and tell me. Thereby, you're saying to people, I might get it wrong. So thereby, you're just showing to people that you're only human at the end of the day. Wouldn't you agree?
I totally get you. Watching especially I watch Formula One in both Italian and English, depending on who's around. I think that's the big problem, because either they commentators, when they don't know, either they underpronounce it or they overpronounce it. I give you an example for the Italian commentator for F1. who's also one of the basically big honchos at Sky Sports in Italy. A pet peeve of mine, but in Italy we say Lewis Hamilton, and I keep saying it's Lewis Hamilton, no? But okay, that I can understand. But then Logan Sargent, in Italian, for some reason, becomes Logan Sargent, like he's French. Unless there is something I don't know, but I've heard my American friends call him Sargent, and there is not a more American name than Sargent, in my opinion. No? So
Yeah.
I say, why? What is the thought process of because if you know your pronunciation, you know that it is Lewis Hamilton, for example, Lewis Hamilton,
Yeah.
to be more precise. No, I for trap myself because in Italian we say
That's fair enough.
Hamilton. No,
Mm.
uh, um, how can you go from Lewis Hamilton to Logan Sargent?
Mm.
Or like I try to explain to my English speaking friends that it's actually Daniel Ricciardo, no, not
That
Ricciardo or
yeah, yeah.
Riccardo.
That is because even I know what the proper Ricciardo, because it's a double C and it's got an I after it as well as an I in front of it. But the thing is that I think people just like when you hear it from him, he says it like an Aussie, which is why
Yeah,
I think everyone has taken it on that point. The same is like, say, with regards to the amount of people, and I know I'm going to put some noses out of joint with this one. Perfect example. There is one German driver on this grid, currently in Formula One, that has an umlaut over the U on his surname. And most people call him Nico Hulkenberg. No, Nico Hülkenberg. That's
Hülkenberg.
how it's said. It's like with the amount of times that people are saying Vettel wrong. The V doesn't sound like a V. It sounds like it's Vettel. It's like there's a bit of an abbreviation. They do say that German is a harsh language. I do appreciate that when the Italians say ambulancia, in Germany we say Krankenwagen. It sounds a bit more harsh and direct, like all the memes that are going out on social media where you've got English, Spanish, Italian, Brazilian Portuguese, and then German comes along, and German it's like with like say the word for butterfly is Schmetterling in German. Like in French it'd be papillon, which sounds a lot more nice and springy and bouncy because it flaps over in the breeze, and it's like Schmetterling. It's like you want to swat it, for instance. But yeah, like you say, it's the fact that the people are good at their jobs, being that they're in they are where they are because they've gotten there through hard work and dedication. And sometimes I think that when people don't always take the time, I think, and this is not a dig at anybody in particular, it's just a generalization that pronunciation of people's surnames from other countries, you do them a disservice if you get it wrong, in all honesty. And we'll leave that topic now completely water under the bridge because we've now expressed our own respective opinions. So thank you very much on that one, Marco. And it's good to hear from someone else who also picks up on it, who is not, first of all, a native English speaker, but also the fact that even he picks up on what the man at Sky Sports Italia says on a regular basis, which is completely understandable. We have a right to our opinion, but we are not throwing anybody under the bus. Far from it. We're just talking about what we have noticed, and it's an opinion. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, but everyone's entitled to one. It's like, pardon my French here, but it's like opinions are like arseholes. Everyone's got one, which is completely true. But let's move on from that. So, Marco, in no particular order, name 3 memorable moments in motorsport that you have either been a part of, or that you've been a part of, or where you've either worked with someone else on a broadcast or it's someone else on the broadcast entirely. Now, this is going to be a bit like choosing children here.
I mean, uh, I don't know if I got the question
Okay,
correctly, but
I'll explain it again.
yes,
So,
yes.
name your top 3 memorable moments that, first of all, come into your head right now. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it can be a case of when you have been on the broadcast. If you have been on the broadcast and you're working with somebody else, or if it is like, say, a MotoGP or an F1 broadcast or a football broadcast that has been done through Italian public service TV, for example. Does that make it a bit easier to understand?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good.
I want to say that I think I was talking with a friend of mine the other day, and he has been at a concert recently, and he was talking to me like how much emotional he was when the band came on the stage. He has been waiting for a long time. Then he said, maybe I'm exaggerating. I said, you don't need to belittle your emotions because
Mm.
everything on surface seems quite pointless. But then if you dig deep down and you put your feelings into it, the equation changes dramatically. No, this friend of mine is a big football fan, and I said, sadly, he supports Liverpool. But I said to him, if you boil down to the end of it,
Yeah.
we are having our weekends ruined or made better by 11 blokes running around a football. So it's seems simple but then there is your emotional participation into it that really makes a difference. So I want to say that one bad memory that always stood with me, and the professionalism of the commentator and the absurd way it felt, going back to this Italian football commentator I was talking about, the guy I really like, but not because of him. It's 2000 and Italy are playing in the Euros final, and Italy are winning 1-0. And in the last minute of injury time, France equalize. So we go to extra time. The trophy of the Euros had already the blue stripes because Italy were basically, there were 30 seconds left when France equalized. So way back when, I'm sure you remember, there was the golden goal. So if the first guy who scored in the extra time, the game was over. And lo and behold, France score and they win the Euros. And I remember I was 11 years old back then, with all my family, all watching the game. And I will never forget like the feeling of the blood inside me freezing. And the commentator goes, the ball goes into the net. There is like 2 seconds of silence where it was probably microphone muted, saying something that we shouldn't say here. And
Yeah.
then I think the microphone opens again and he goes, La Francia è campione d'Europa. France are European champions. And the moment he said that, that's when it hit me. It wasn't the ball in the net. It wasn't the French players celebrating and screaming. It was the guy saying, France are European champions. You're done. Okay. On another side of things, I wouldn't say memorable. Memorable for me,
Yes.
in
For
my
you.
very first trial broadcast with Apex Racing TV, those V8s at Bathurst, my colleague for the day, my co-commentator for the day was basically Sam Fitzpatrick. We became a commentary duo. Since that day, we basically did almost all of our work together. And he has always been perfect, no problems. He had a bit of a crappy PC back then, but still, But that day and that day only, midway through race one, with the pack battling on the mountain at Bathurst, on my trial broadcast, his internet drops for 10 minutes. So his internet drops. I stop talking, and then Samuli Kumo, our camera guy from Finland, he says, in a very Kimi Raikkonen voice, Marco, I think you're on your own. So, big deep breath, and I had to go for it. And it was like a moment where I said, all of my fears, I was talking about earlier, not having spoken in pub, never having done commentary in English in my life, and a league of new drivers I have never heard about before. New
Mm.
names, new teams, color schemes. they were racing at Bathurst. That was their big race of the season.
Yeah.
Okay, and the fact that I managed to escape that situation, without any disaster, and I think that was like the moment I said, okay, maybe I can do this. I still need to improve a lot, but that's 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 good. And then uh, it's it's difficult to explain. I still want to go back to football. Maybe because the collective
Uh,
memory of this country
I, I
is
I think it's quite poignant because obviously when we talked about football earlier on, I can see whenever you're talking about it, your eyes light up. So that's why I think for Marco, and folks, this is not about special treatment. This is just like going with the flow with this conversation. So yeah, let's go back to football. So hit me with it with your final one out of the top three that you've picked for today's show.
uh, everybody remembers the final of the 2006 World Cup, because that's
Hmm.
Italy won on penalties against France. It was the revenge for the Euros final of 6 years before, no. But the big memory I have in my heart is the semi-final against Germany. And the fact of the matter is that that was not hearing the commentary. I'm going to explain. So we had this tradition during the Euros with a friend of mine that we every time we had watched Italy against Ghana when we won and together, and we watched it in a public place, not at our houses. Then the game after, we had to watch it separately. And Italy against the USA 1-1. Italy went down to 10 men. So we had this tradition that we said from the elimination, the knockout round onwards, we need to watch the game like in neutral ground. So we do this, and in the semi-final against Germany, we opt for a restaurant near near where we both lived. July, so you can imagine 200 billion degrees in Rome,
Yeah.
and there is this like big screen with the projector, and we have dinner during. That was a bad idea, by the way, because we couldn't focus on the food. Nobody was hungry, and the game goes to extra time.
Yeah.
And the commentary was very very loud because everybody in the restaurant had to hear it. So of course, in the dying minutes of the second half of extra time, Fabio Grosso scores that incredible goal, and I will never forget. I never heard the commentary from that goal because the last thing I heard was the commentator saying that the shot was taken, and then I honestly don't remember what happened next. If you can imagine, like a complete pandemonium.
Yeah.
I think I jumped on top of a table. Uh, and that was like I was not I remember like people hugging with strangers, and it was one of those moments that you never forget. I think,
Mm.
and when people ask me which one was your favorite, I am adamantly against summer. I don't like summer. Right now in Rome is like boiling hot. It's 11 p.m. I hate summer, but I always tell them my favorite summer was 2006. For not just for the World Cup, it was a combination of factors. That was my first year really watching baseball, which became, I don't know if people can see it because the webcam doesn't like it, but I have a tattoo of the New York Mets here, so I'm a
Yeah. Yeah.
quite quite a big baseball
We
fan.
we
So
we we've had quite a few conversations off air from AMX Global about the Mets, saying like, yeah, they're. I'm gonna watch. I'm gonna watch them. I'm gonna watch the Mets now. Yeah, it's a bit of a love.
it
It's a love hate affair when it's like that as well, isn't it? Because
it
it,
is.
it it just goes to show that some of us people who are commentators, whether it be sim racing or IRL, myself being one of the fortunate ones to having crossed that divide since May of 2020. It just goes to show that we are real people, folks. We do adore. Some of us do, like Marco does with the Mets tattoo on his the inside of his left forearm. It just shows passion in so many different ways. But we've got two more questions to go before we wrap things up here on episode 22. Your penultimate question, Marco Barbanera, is future goals in commentary for yourself. What would you like to achieve in the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years?
Uh, it depends on how some things go in real life. Right now, I even mentioned this, but when I said that after leaving Apex Racing TV, I never really stopped. That's because a couple of years after starting this, I got contacted by the Italian NASCAR Championship, which that's the reason why I have Daytona behind me, because we had Daytona opening race of the season last night, and we have the virtual studio, and I said, okay, let's have like picture of the racetrack, and each week is going to change. So they contacted me because their commentator left out of nowhere after like 3 races of the season, and so I started, basically I am like I was contacted by the league, but then the broadcasting is done by an Italian company. Okay, so this company in 2019 was basically won the Italian Automobile Club of Italy. Got finally said, okay, we need to go into sim racing. We are going to basically allow on Assetto Corsa and on iRacing some organizations to organize leagues in our name. The winner is a champion of Italy, etc. So it's like there's end of the year award prizes, of course. No? So basically, this guy Stefano, which I say hello to him because he wanted to watch this, he said basically, Marco, need a commentator for the first ever Italian official esports competition. Are you interested? And I said yes. So from then, this first tournament was like 3 races in Monza, like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That was the first Italian champion. And then for the end 2020, of course, we started having like 4 leagues. For basically we have usually during the spring there's GT3 and Italian Championship and Coppa Italia, which is like the second division. And then in the fall, we have Open Wheel and then TCR or GT4 or stuff like that. Now, so I kept doing the Italian stuff, but the Italian stuff is low intensity because it's like once every couple of weeks. So,
Yeah.
And I still do that now. Besides, so I never really stopped, but of course. So depending on how things go in real life, I have to be honest with you, I always get the itch of, going back to full time, because the burnout was real, but I also think I'm very honest with myself. I know when I'm doing too much, I know when to stop, because in the past I got burned by this. So when I started feeling that it was too much, I contacted Lee Thompson of Apex. He was very understanding. I told him 1 month before, I said, by the end of December, I want to stop. And he said, you can stop now if you want. I said, no, let's stop at the end. So he was very graceful. I said, no, let's wait until the end of the month. So, but also I am also realizing that from March of 2020 and all of that year, like I remember in 2020 at the peak of the pandemic, Alex, there was a period where I did like 2 or 3 broadcasts per day because everybody came into sim racing. Mind you, it was a fantastic time because it gave me the chance to know all these people. I mean, even not just talking to people, but for example, we had a league that was organized by a magazine, I don't remember the name, that ran like every day for like 7 straight days with the most promising up and coming drivers from karting, Formula Regional, Formula 4 national leagues. So, for example, in that racing series, we had Callum Williams, Dennis Auger, or people that now you recognize in F2 and F3 now, for example. Sebastian Montoya also, for example, was there, which, by the way, he was racing with his father's account. So in the graphics, it was Juan Pablo Montoya. So, so I also know that the burnout was possibly also due to the fact that it was unprecedented amount of work. So maybe now of course, sim racing is more popular than it was before, but not as extreme in the level of events as it was back
Yeah.
2 years back. So I really love doing this. The times sometimes are crazy. Most of the times are, especially if you like me, like doing the oval side of things. So, but who knows? I almost given up on doing this stuff in real life, but who knows? Maybe things will change in that regard. Like if you told me 1 year ago what I'm doing right now in real life, which is working IT for a company, I would have said like absolutely no way, no. But I'm doing it right now, so
Mm.
who knows?
Who knows? Indeed, you never know. I mean, especially if they wanted to get you on, say, one of the broadcasts for, like, say, Porsche Carrera Cup Italia, Italian GT Open, Italian Clear Cup as well, because that's still quite heavily subscribed. Plenty of cars on that. But Marco, we come down to your final question, and this is where we flip the script a little bit here on Commentator's Corner. I will ask my guest the question, and then I provide a reflective response. So, Marco, if there was no glass ceiling, no budget at all, and you had the choice of a circuit to drive at, and you had you had a car, whether it be road car or race car to pick from, where would you drive? What car would you pick, and why?
Okay,
I've got you thinking now, haven't I?
because I know the car I would drive.
Okay.
I would drive a 1998 Renard Honda from Chip Ganassi Racing with the number 1 on top of it. Of course, that was the car Alex Zanardi drove for his second title, but also the one of the year before because they were pretty similar. And even the one from 1996 that Jimmy Wasser won in. I'm not. I just want to drive one of those. I think that was the golden era of open wheel racing. Those cars sounded beautiful, were beautiful, very versatile, road course, oval, short track, street circuit. No matter, they were beautiful, and they had like so many different engine manufacturers, and there was a
Mm.
tire war. Some teams like Penske built their own cars. Other like Ganassi used the Renard chassis, but then they made some little changes. It was a very creative part of, and those cars are beautiful. I am glad that Racer Studios have put them in Automobilista too, with the official license, by the way. Where would I drive it? Well, I think I would be, you know, give me two options because, oval and road, no? So
Fine. 100%. Someone actually did a 6-car cavalcade of McLarens. Yeah,
I would,
earlier on in the series. So I'm open to any suggestions. So we'll go oval and we'll go road course on your choice, which is the Reynard 981, which probably would have been, as you said, Chip Ganassi Racing was running Jimmy Vasser alongside Alex Zanardi with the Honda HRK engines. Primary sponsor was Target as well.
yes,
So, okay, choice for oval and choice for road course, Marco.
I would probably drive it at Michigan with the 1996 package because that was before the Unfor device, which they it slowed them down a bit for device. In 1996, they were having ludicrous speeds. Also, that was where Emerson Fittipaldi in the second Michigan race had his crash, basically ended his career. The first Michigan race, we don't talk about it. And as a road course, I don't want to commit a crime by saying a European track, so I would say my favorite North American track, which is Road America. I think I would drive it there, absolutely. And why? As I said, I think because those cars were not super expensive compared to the same era F1 cars, a bit more rough around the edges, but still they were technically impressive. They were so good at adapting at every different kind of racetrack. They sounded beautiful and they provided for some absolutely fantastic racing. And more importantly, which is, on a side note, what I really miss about the motorsport of when I was growing up. I think the motorsport today, especially in F1, there is incredible balance. Of course, we see Verstappen win every Sunday, but the field is super compact. There is one thing that's missing: the mechanical failures. Back then, you watched the race and you never knew even if a guy was dominating by
Yep.
30 seconds, at the drop of a hat, something could fail. Nowadays, I don't want to wish anything bad luck on any driver, but it's very. How many times in recent years have you seen a guy leading an F1 Grand Prix and having to park the car? Or the same goes for IndyCar, for that matter, or NASCAR. NASCAR has got this big problem that the races have stayed very long, but the engines have become super reliable, so they rarely break down. Even though, if you remember, like 10, 15 years ago, for example, the Charlotte was 600 miles for a reason, because those engines had to go 600 miles. It wasn't an easy task. So that I watched that era of racing on a slight delay. Even though I watched some races from 99, 2000, 2001. So but already in 2000, 2001, kart was already going downhill. So I just missed that golden era. It was such a pleasure to go back and watch those races. Not only watching them, but also going through the Zanardi book and watching the race and then reading his account of the race, which is was always quite amusing, especially when things didn't go his way and he had some beefing with the drivers. So that is my choice.
Okay. We are going to stick with the 1997 Kart FedEx, 1998 Kart FedEx Championship Series that year. Because, folks, there were two other Italians racing that year. One was Schiattarella, and the other one is someone that probably quite a few people might know this name. Max Papis raced, and it was with the Arcelo Wells Racing Renard 981 with the Toyota RV8C running in the number 25 MCI entry. So we're going to keep on the Italian theme here, and I feel it's very appropriate. I'm going to go with Milwaukee as the oval, and there is a particular track that was not on the calendar that year, but also was a very challenging track, especially when IndyCar started hitting it, and Danica Patrick became the first ever female IndyCar race winner at Twin Ring Motegi, and that is my road course choice. So there you have it, folks. You got two respective kart cars from two Italian drivers that were both competing in 1998. Max Papis' best result that season was at Houston later on in the year. He was running, I think he had so much reliability troubles that year, did the full season, got fifth at Houston. But Marco, I have to say, mille grazie. Thank you very much for being part of the show. This is actually officially, folks, the longest ever episode of Commentator's Corner. We are just shy. Well, we are actually, as I say that, hitting 90 minutes. But Marco, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on Commentator's Corner for episode 22. Where can people find you on the social medias, my friend? Because the links will be in the description down below.
Yes, let me add just one more bit of trivia to that, since we are already running long. Because in 1996, when Zanardi came over to America to, test out for some car teams that were interested, he tested for the Wells Racing and then for Chip Ganassi Racing. And basically, he said in his book that the deal with the Arcero Wells Racing was basically done. But then then Ganassi called him and he said, "I have a contract for you." And he went to Wells, which was this was his first year as a team owner, and he said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Wells, but I got a call from Ganassi. I'm so embarrassed." And Zanardi, in his books, writes that Carl Wells told him, "You are crazy. You are signing with Ganassi. Go and sign that contract. Don't worry about me." so so that car then became the car of Max Favis. But as in the immortal words of my colleague from Apex Racing TV, Sam Cuomo, the producer for my very first broadcast, somebody in the chat once said, "Oh, I really like the Italian guy voice," and he wrote in the YouTube chat, "The problem is not letting him talk. The problem is making him stop," which is a very fair assessment. And I am absolutely 100% on board with it. So thank you
Brilliant.
for having me, Alex. It was a big, big pleasure.
No problem. I will link Marco's Twitter handle in
Oh,
the
so
description down
yes.
below. So it's all right. It's all right. But folks, thank you very much for joining us for what is now the longest ever episode of Commentator's Corner, episode number 22. And a big thank you to my guest, Marco Barbanera, direct from the locality of Rome in Italy for this episode. We've got some great guests coming up. Don't forget, you can also, if you haven't had the opportunity to watch this, you can also listen to it on the following platforms: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Spotify. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll see you very soon for episode number 23. Goodbye.